So I'll run through how to do etching as well as a couple other special features here. So I'll just open up this file. And opening it up down here, we've got a little status bar here. All right, so this one here, we've got some extraneous information. If I click into this layers box here, if I click next to the eyeball, I can make layers hidden. So the key thing here is you want to click on the eyeball if you want to shut off a layer or hide it, and you'll see the eyeball gets grayed out. And then when you click out of that box there, then that layer is then hidden. If you want to get that back, you can come back here and click on the eyeball. So one thing you want to be careful about that is sometimes people will click on the layer name, which actually changes you to that layer. And then if you're like, oh, actually, I didn't want to do that, I want to hide that, click on the eyeball. And then they like try to draw something, and then the lines will just disappear. And that's because you're on this dim layer, which you have hidden. If I unhide that, then those lines that I was drawing will show up back there. So just click on the eyeball, gray the eyeball out, and then click out of the box, and that turns off that layer. And this text here, I can either leave it there or I can just select it to delete that. So since I'm in select mode here, if I drag a box from right to left, if it's just crossing the box, it'll select anything that's crossing the box. So if I do it like this, it'll select all that except for those parentheses. If I drag a box from left to right, it's got to be totally within the box, and we'll just delete that. And this one here, some other little things here. So if you've got lines that need to be cleaned up over here on the left, you can use this trim command, and you can trim lines if somebody did some sloppy CAD. Here we've got an opening. I've got the line command, start the line command. And as I hover near the end of the line there, that blue box shows I'll snap to the end of that line, and I can close that up there. But again, since I was doing that on the dim layer, that didn't show up. So let me turn that dim layer back on there. And what I'll actually do is I'll do an undo and get rid of that and turn off that dim layer again and switch back to the 0 layer. And now when I draw that line, it'll show up. All right, so we hit our next button. So on this second screen here, I'll switch to a abrasive machine, whatever material. Okay, so over on the right here, we've got different functions that you can do for open geometries and things, special features. So there's open contour cutting. So this line down here, if we wanted to cut this as a slit, then we can use open contour cutting. You can expand that tool, and you can choose what quality that you want to do that slit cut at. We're going to go with smoothest, and whatever end of the line that I click on, that's the end that it's going to pierce at. And when I do that, it adds it up here to my cut sequence. And then these numbers up here, if I wanted to etch these, then up here I can expand my marking tool. And then again, whatever end of the line that I click on, that's the end that it's going to pierce at to do the etching. So we'll click and etch those lines there. There are other things you can do if you wanted to go to a certain location, just stop. Over here on the left, we've got this point function, so you can choose to do things like abrasive pierce. If you had a drill and a tap, you could choose those, or just a stop. So if you wanted to go to location and stop, you can choose that and click on that point over here. And then you'll see as I move my mouse down, I can grab the edge of this little box here, and I can expand this box. So as you add more cuts to your cut sequence, then you can expand that so it's a little bit easier to see what's going on. So we've got an open contour cut, and then we're marking those items, and then we're going to a stop there. And the other thing that I like to show people on this drawing, which I should have done on the first screen, is this little hole here. Say, for example, we just wanted to pierce a hole there. We didn't actually want to try to cut the hole because it's a really small hole. We just want to put a pierce in there. We're going to come back and maybe drill it out later. On the geometry screen, you have this point function here. So if I click on the point command, and I'll just zoom in here a little bit. As I hover near the center of this circle, you see that little blue circle shows up there. So if I click now, it'll put a point right at the middle of that circle. Double click my scroll wheel to zoom out. So you got your scroll wheel, zoom in and out with your scroll wheel. If you're way out, you can double click and zoom extents. So when I go back now to my part screen, unfortunately I have to re-add that stuff that I did earlier, but that's fine because that's good practice here. So again, we'll do our open contour cutting on the slit. So I just click there, put it up there. I'm going to do my marking for the numbers here. So you can see it's added those to my cut sequence. And for this one here, I'm going to do just a pierce on that one. So I go to my point functions and choose abrasive pierce and click on that. That puts it up there. And then we'll change to a stop and put that over there. And I think that covers it for that part. So then we can just hit our next button. And I'm going to click on auto and see what we do here. So sometimes a geometry like this, because it's kind of small and based on the length of lead in, it didn't add the can't add the lead in. You can go into edit leads and you can adjust either this inside or this other lead. So if the inside lead fails, it tries to use this other column. So if I adjust this to something like 0.1, then it should be able, if I click on auto again, it should be able to put the lead on there. And then if you want to change your lead position, you can just very easily just click and change lead position. If I want to do things like change cut quality, so all these inside cuts, if I want to change their cut quality, I can just hold down my control key, select a bunch of cuts, and then come down here and change these to a different quality. And let's see, we got that. We'll hit our next button. And then when I click on the CNC button, it'll of course create my file. We'll just take a look at the code here. So we'll save that there. So what we'll see here at the beginning is we'll have a code here. This M100.02 tells the pump to go into low pressure. And then there's a 2-second delay to make sure that the pump has gone into low pressure. If that's not long enough, you can change that number. I'll show you where that is. And then we've got a traverse, and then turns water and abrasive on, and it's doing the etch line, or actually that's the that is the etching, because we've got it up here that this is marking. So it's doing the etching at the low pressure, and this right now it's doing it with water and abrasive. And then when it's done, you'll see the M101.02, which tells the pump to go into high pressure. And then again, there's in this case, a 4-second delay. And then as we go down here, now this will be the cutting. So this will be the slit cuts. And that's the speed that it's doing the slit cut at. And then it's got the other cutting that it does. Let's see, we got that. So this is the pierce, where it did that, just the doing a point function, it's just doing the pierce. And then we're going over and actually cutting our different geometries there. So some of the things that you can change, if you go up, first of all, into your material database. So we're on our 1/4-inch aluminum here. Normally these are the only 2 tabs that you see. If you click on this advanced button, then there's some additional tabs that show up, including the marking tab. So on the marking tab, you can control things like the speed that you want to do your marking at. So if we want to do our etching a little bit slower, we can change that feed rate. You can choose whether you want to do abrasive with your etching or not, and then whether you want to do it at low pressure. So you might want to start off doing it just as water only at low pressure. And then if you want to add a little bit of abrasive, then you can check that box there to use the abrasive when you're doing your marking. So if we do it like this, low pressure, water only, and click on Save and Exit. So now we'll just make this file again. And if I go up to the top of the file here, so again, it starts off, goes into low pressure, and now we see we have this M60, which is just water on, and then there's our feed rate for the etching, 50 inches a minute, and then water off, and then it moves, and then again etch and etch. So that's how you can change those parameters for the etching. And then the other things you can change for those delays, like for the pump to go to high pressure and low pressure. To do that, you need to press your scroll lock key on your keyboard, which if you don't have a scroll lock key, then You can bring up your on-screen keyboard by, on your Windows prompt, just start typing in on-screen keyboard, and you'll get something like this, and you'll have a button here for scroll lock. And you may or may not actually have to turn that on depending on which options are currently enabled where we're about to go here. So we're going to actually leave the scroll lock button off for right now. So if you go up into options, edit variables, it'll bring up this window here. Let's minimize this. So let's see, where's our delays? That's under, must be under water jet area here. So these are alphabetical. So as you work your way down, you've got your different delays, abrasive on, codes, dwell after abrasive off, dwell after abrasive on. You got your dwell after abrasive on low pressure. So dwell after high pressure, so that's the dwell after you tell the pump to go into high pressure. So I'd put in something like 12 seconds. And then you got dwell after low pressure. I'd probably put 12 seconds on something like that too. So there's other delays that you have in here, like dwell after marking water off, dwell after marking water on. So generally, dwell after marking water on, you want to leave that very short, because the longer you delay, that you'll get bigger divot when you first start your pierce for the marking. So if we just change those delays for the pump, and we go back and recreate this. All right. So now we'll come down. So again, we've got our command to go tell the pump to go to low pressure. Now we've got a 12-second delay. G04 is a delay, and then F is time. F 12 seconds. And then when we come down, after all the marking, pump goes up to high pressure and 12-second delay. So that's how you can do marking. And then if you do want a little bit deeper etch, as I mentioned, you go into your material database and click on the advanced, go back to marking. So you got your use abrasive mark, and then this point dwell here. If you want to reduce that amount of time when it first does that marking, you can zero that out. And now if we go back and create it one more time here, and so we've got our water and abrasive on, and then we've got our marking again at 50 inches a minute. Just have to be careful that on the mini hopper, if you are in low pressure, you want to manually change the position of that slider, probably down to probably half what it might be set at right now, because since you're at low pressure, you don't have as much suction into the cutting head. So if you leave the slider positioned at its normal high pressure point, then you can basically put too much abrasive down into the cutting head and get clogs. And then you just have to be careful when you get to the end, when the pump is doing its ramp up where you got this 12-second delay. You can just basically hit the stop button on the controller, and if you don't have enough time, then you can manually move that slider back up to its normal high pressure setting. So if you have any questions on that, give me a call. Thanks.